Saitama realized that he arrived too late to save Genos, and this causes him to go completely berserk. Saitama has finally been pushed past his limit. With the death of Genos, Saitama, for the first time in the One Punch Man universe, will show his true power. God Garou has shown to become the greatest threat that the world and Saitama have ever seen. The first true God-level threat. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that Saitama will win, but we have never seen him truly this pissed off. To see his best friend being murdered in cold blood and Garou just simply taunting it, throwing Saitama Genos' core, his heart, causes Saitama to go into a complete berserk and immediately throw a serious punch directly at Garou. But to the viewer's surprise, Garou was able to copy Saitama's serious mode and throw a serious punch back, to which Blast says that this level of power clashing could destroy the entire planet, could shatter the entire Earth. So I think it's pretty evident here that Blast will be teleporting these two either off planet or to another dimension. At least I hope that he can, because he said that his dimensional gates were overloading from all of the power that Garou was generating. So it is also possible that maybe Blast can't, in fact, teleport them off-world or to some other dimension or something like that. And we learn a lot in this chapter. After we got the translations, I really sat down and dissected it, and I want to go over some of the really important paneling because there was a ton of story development, lots of changes from the webcomic, and we're finally getting like seemingly an actual threat for Saitama. I mean, this was easily a 10 out of 10 chapter. Of course, there's still some webcomic elitists that are complaining on Twitter, but honestly, who cares about them? This chapter was insane. The One Punch Man for the first time was trending on Twitter, and I have just seen such an overwhelming outpour of support for this series currently. I mean, fans are really jumping on the hype train for this mega fight between Saitama and Garou, introducing a lot of new fans, and it's just amazing. I mean, this is easily my favorite chapter ever. I literally sat down and just reread it for like 4 hours, just jaw on the ground. I just can't grasp how insane it is. So there's so much to talk about. I'm going to break this whole chapter down panel by panel because there's a lot. Get your popcorn and let's dive in. So the first thing to talk about here is actually the cover page, which has Garou's colors, showing you that kind of black armor with cosmic everything inside of him. And it turns out that little formation in his chest is a nebula known as the Horsehead Nebula, which is located in the constellation of Orion the Hunter. And real quick about the radiation, so that aura that you're seeing off of Garou as he walks towards the S-Class heroes is a cosmic levels of radiation. If you weren't aware, there is a lot of radiation out there in the universe. Now, I'm not 100% sure, they don't explain whether or not Garou is doing this on purpose because he has mastered the flow of all energy and all things in the universe, or is this because of his transfusion with God? In any case, it's powerful in his own right. Just simply by battling him, by being in his proximity, you'll die to critical levels of radiation. I mean, that's pretty insane. The guy's literally a walking nuclear reactor, which makes sense because he does throw these like nuclear fists. Now, Bang says that he senses something evil inside of Garou, something is controlling him, and Garou continues to tell the audience that no, it's not God, but we do learn later on from Blast that yes, God definitely has some level of influence on Garou and he's out of control. So then Blast arrives, and this is also interesting because of the chapter 164 redraw. In the initial issue, Blast came with a crew of other fighters, including Boros, or a Boros lookalike. So where are they? I'm not really sure. Is this a rewrite? Is Boros and company not coming? I guess they're not. But here Blast agrees with Silverfang, saying that Garou is being controlled by God, telling Garou, couldn't you tell by the nature of this divine power that you were given? Any attack you unleash while on this planet could endanger the very existence of all living things. Does that line up with your actual goals? Two other interesting things here. Silverfang, I guess, has never met Blast. He doesn't know who this guy is until Blast says, I'm Blast. And also, Garou doesn't know that the creature that gave him this power is actually God, or at least is called God. Garou has zero understanding of what exactly this creature is that was lending him this deal. So Garou says to Blast, what should I do about it then? And Blast says, If you accept the reality of the situation and see how your cosmic radiation that you're emitting is killing all of these humans, let me take you to another dimension, which is probably why at the end of this chapter, the very next panel after this, after the next chapter, is going to be Blast teleporting Garou and Saitama to this other dimension where their serious punches should meet. And we'll talk about the cataclysmic clash of that in just a minute. On the next page, we learn even more things. For one, Blast is resistant to this cosmic radiation. Why is that? Is it part of his power? Does he have some sort of shield up? Has he also taken power from God, which I definitely think he has? I'm going to talk about that coming up as well. But Blast acknowledges that Garou has retained some sense of his humanity, that he managed to stave off a full importation of power. To which we see this nervous face on Blast when he says to himself, what would it have been like if he allowed himself to be fully imported or imparted by the God power? And yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Is Garou as strong as God at this point? I thought Blast was out in space fighting God with a bunch of other S+ tier galactic heroes. So why is he so frightened by Garou's power? And how comes he couldn't do more to Garou? If he's out there fighting God, why is he struggling so much with one of God's avatars that only has a sliver of God's power, not even the full thing? That's a big question. Have we seen Blast's full power in this chapter? I doubt it. I mean, he actually felt relatively weak in this chapter, but let's get there now. So Blast says something very interesting here. He says, I hope Garou will come along and listen, but if not, it will be a battle for supremacy between two beings who manipulate the reality of the cosmos to decide who is right and who is wrong. Meaning that Blast's power seemingly is relatively similar to Garou's in the sense that you can change reality. It sounds like Blast probably has had some sort of impartation from God himself as well, probably from collecting the cubes. Maybe the first cube he ever picked up, he was zapped by some of God's power. Maybe that's what made Blast what he is and gave him all of his dimensional capabilities, which we know that God also has. Garou is extremely proud of himself for finally becoming the symbol of fear for humanity, the true disaster level god. And yes, he is far stronger than Boros at this point. I mean, his power level is like actually insane. I feel like he could destroy the earth with just a bunch of his nuclear fission attacks, and he actually ends up copying Blast's gravity knuckle as well as having the gamma ray burst. So yes, he truly is disaster level god. But if Garou is this strong, I'm just wondering, like, how strong is the actual god? And we see Garou throwing off his humanity here. I'll finish off my master, the little kid will die. This is just how it needs to be for me to become and stay absolute evil. It seems that the impartation from God just simply allowed Garou to sever his humanity completely. And he's not like fighting to protect humans anymore. He doesn't care anymore. He just wants to kill everything. And as he was just talking about Terrio, we get this image of Terrio who is passed out on the floor, blood coming out of his mouth, dying from radiation. And even this doesn't startle Garou, meaning that he's not going to simply see Terrio and regain his humanity or his sense of morality. He is pure evil, which means to me that this fight will not end with Garou snapping out of it. The only way it's going to end is for Saitama to straight up defeat Garou, who seems to be invincible in this chapter. Genos comes in with the flying headbutt that nobody saw coming, a valiant last-ditch effort to do some damage and take out Garou, but obviously that's not going to stop him. So as Garou holds up Genos' head, he says, so that Baldy was at a high enough level to have an S-class hero like yourself as an apprentice. That makes sense. And this is because of Garou versus Genos' first altercation when they fought. Genos mentioned his master Saitama and that Garou will never be able to catch up to him. We see Blast activate his wrists, creating the infinity symbol for like singularity and shooting out the dimension cannon, just a ball of black energy that appears to basically be like some sort of gateway blast. Garou jumps over it and we don't see the explosion, but he does get sucked into a portal. So I think this dimension cannon is more of like a utility kind of attack than an actual like destructive attack. And I'm not sure if the dimension cannon is what is creating these rifts or if Blast is just kind of activating that passively. We don't see him do any hand symbols or anything like that here. He does do one later, which leads me to question the actual strength of Blast. I mean, we know that he's very fast. He hits Garou here in the face with Gravity Knuckle, and it looks like it does damage, but it doesn't. After getting a barrage of Gravity Knuckles to the face and the whole body, Garou takes literally 0 damage. So I'm not sure, this doesn't feel strong from Blast. I mean, yes, it was a cool technique. He kind of controlled Garou for a little bit, but he didn't inflict any damage at all. So is Blast holding back because he's worried about the Earth? That's very possible. Or maybe he's just not at the level of Garou. Blast's attacks seem to be kind of underwhelming. At least the Gravity Knuckle didn't really seem to improve him that much, besides maybe just simply adding more strength, or perhaps he has to use the Gravity Knuckle in order to keep these rifts open in order to do this combination attack on Garou. But it seems what Blast was actually trying to do was just control Garou to the point where he could get these 2 rifts to close in on each other and seal, which would either one, crush Garou, or just lock him in some crazy alternate dimension. And Garou somehow is able to open up the portal and float out, also taking the Gravity Knuckle attack on his right hand and having the Nuclear Fission Fist on his left hand, which is absolutely insane. Now, I don't know how Garou escaped here. I guess the only reasonable explanation is that if he's able to copy Blast's Gravity Knuckle, then he could perhaps also copy his dimensional capabilities and allow himself to get out. Now he's combining attacks, the Gravity Knuckle plus the Nuclear Fission Fist, and this is one of the most insane attacks. Definitely could blow a huge chunk of Earth up in a second, and Blast knows this. So he creates a swarm of small dimensional portals to which all of the attacks go into, and Blast is actually going to redirect and launch those attacks out into the sky. And that's when you see these giant bubbles of nuclear energy, which is kind of like Homeless Emperor's attack on steroids. This also leads me to believe that Blast is not even remotely using his own full power, probably because, as you can see here, he's more concerned about protecting the Earth and humanity than he is some crazy destructive attack to finish off Garou. So I think this is writing to essentially give us hype with Blast, show off some of his powers and such, without him like stealing the show and taking the fight from Saitama. I have a feeling here that Blast is probably equal or pretty close to Garou at full power, but we won't ever really know that for sure. But I am pretty certain here he's more focused on protecting than actually attacking, which is why he seemed a bit underwhelming. Now, those big bubble blasts in the sky get sucked into a dimensional portal, and I'm not 100% sure if this is Blast doing, if he is physically sucking all of the nuclear energy and everything out of the sky because he doesn't want, I guess, more radiation or more explosions to be around Earth, or if this is the combination of the Gravity Knuckle that is in fact doing this, which I kind of feel more so like it is, because it wasn't just the nuclear fission attack, there was also half of it being the Gravity Knuckle. So it appears to blast out nuclear energy and then suck you into a black hole. That's pretty damn devastating of an attack. So when it gets sucked into the black hole, it blows Garou and Blast away, and Blast says that the gates are bursting from an overload of energy. If this goes on much longer, Earth will become a dead planet. And it appears that he has like kind of a finite number of dimensional gates that he can use at a certain time. And also those gates can only house so much mass, and because there's so many like nuclear explosions inside of it and so much energy inside the gates, it looks like Blast might not be able to open many more portals, which also leads me to question, is he going to be able to transfer Saitama and Garou at the end of this chapter somewhere? Now, Garou says something else that's interesting. He says, for now, even S rank number 1 is not even worth my attention. Garou thinks that he is far superior to Blast, but again, I don't think Blast is using his full power. I don't think he even remotely is. To which Garou says that Baldy wasn't giving it his all, so if I copy and refine his full power, then I'll be able to defeat him and win. But it's interesting because Garou, he's not supposed to be copying power, he's supposed to be copying techniques and natural energy, natural occurrences and things like that. So I don't know how he thinks that he can copy Saitama's power, but that's a big question for the end of this chapter. People are wondering, is Garou's Serious Punch going to be as strong as Saitama's. In order to bait Saitama's full power out, Garou picks up Genos by the head and straight up kills him, shoots his hand directly through Genos' heart, takes out his core, and it appears that Genos is straight up dead. Whether or not he's going to come back, there's a lot of theories on it, but it is very possible that he could just be straight up dead. Remember, this is the manga, not the webcomic, which would mean that the future of One Punch Man is uncertain. If Genos dies here, then we could just jump straight into the War on God arc after this. I mean, Blast is seeing how strong Saitama is, and he may actually want to recruit him. Speaking of Saitama, that's when he actually lands at the battlefield with a dead Genos laying on the ground, Blast behind Garou, and Saitama is pissed. We've only seen Saitama pissed off a few times in the series, and if you take a look at the One Punch Man opening, you are led to believe that there is this berserking mode Saitama deep within him somewhere. Blast recognizes Saitama and says, "Oh, you're that guy from before, don't come close." So yes, obviously at this point, Blast does not know Saitama's true capabilities, in case you were all wondering. I mean, we've seen Blast kind of act like an Esper. He knows when God is granting power to people, or at least offering them power. He seems to come at the most opportune moment. He seems to almost be able to read Garou and recognize him very well, but he doesn't know anything about Saitama. It's almost as if Saitama is unreadable. Garou throws Genos' heart over to Saitama, who catches it and stares at it, and then proceeds to have this flashback of a time he had with Genos. Now, this flashback is actually from a very early chapter. I believe it's when they're going to the House of Evolution, and Genos was saying how it's amazing that you always manage to be there on time, to which Saitama says, "No, I usually arrive too late." If you remember in chapter 154, as Garou, Platinum S, and Flashy Flash are all fighting in the sky, moving at light speed, Saitama and Genos have this moment here, to which Genos says, "When the time came for me to self-destruct, I was no longer able to do it." And Saitama taps his chest and says, "Well, that just means you got stronger here." A touching moment between Saitama and Genos, who thanks him for making him feel more like a human. Now, on the next page, a lot of things happen. First of all, Saitama starts to question himself. Do I really have a hero's intuition? He says, "It sure doesn't seem like it," and that's when he clasps his fist. Saitama here is blaming himself for Genos' death because he was not there on time. Saitama obviously doesn't see himself as the quintessential hero, whereas Genos, who always has looked up to Saitama, has pretty much been the quintessential hero. And I think Saitama really deep down here thinks that he was late because he wasn't really trying, and that's part of his issue. The reason that he's always late or whatever is because he's too lazy, or he's not going his full power, he's not trying. He's lost that hunger that he had during the era when he was training for 3 years and lost his hair. He doesn't really have that sense of motivation anymore because life got boring, and because of that, he allowed Genos to die right in front of him. This is going to send him completely over the edge, and he is not going to hold back anymore against Garou. Now, if we take a closer look at these heroes who are knocked out due to the radiation, King seems to be moving a little bit, but interestingly about King, because he's taken out and Blast is right there, Blast should know King's secret now, that he really isn't that strong. You see Flashy Flash is propping himself up on a sword. Which sword is that? His sword is broken. Yeah, I think that might actually be like a misdraw, because Insta-Kill is broken right now, and he doesn't have any other weapon, I don't think, unless he picked one up off one of the dead sword masters. Also, take a look at Zombie Man. Even with his regeneration capability, he's still being destroyed by the radiation. Saitama throws a serious punch directly into Garou's face. So the other serious punch we saw against Boros, he didn't even connect. Just the airwaves from it alone were able to split the clouds of the earth in half. So imagine if a punch like that actually hits the earth. I think it's pretty evident, yes, it could destroy the earth if Saitama unleashed his full power here. And connecting with Garou's also serious punch, which he's going to do here, he's going to copy Saitama's serious mode. And who knows what that all means? I mean, this is what's really exciting, because we've seen serious squirt guns, serious table flip, serious sidestep, serious headbutt, serious punch, but what else is there in the arsenal? Is Garou able to replicate Saitama's power? I wouldn't think so. I mean, he's able to replicate the flow of all things in the entire universe, but that's not supposed to be power. Like, it's supposed to mean he can copy techniques and also use techniques of like kind of natural cataclysmic events and energies. But he thinks that he's able to copy Saitama's serious mode. He thinks that it will make him stronger than Saitama's serious mode. So one of two things has to happen here. Number one, Blast teleports them both either into another dimension or on some other planet, and they're going to fight out in space somewhere for the rest of the arc. Or Garou simply thinks that he can copy Saitama's power in his serious mode, but he actually can't. So I think there's a good chance here that their punches connect and Saitama's just powers through Garou's like crazy, and Garou's just gonna be like, what the hell, I copied him, like why didn't it work? This is consecutive 10 out of 10 chapters for like the last 3 chapters. It just keeps getting better and better. It's actually unbelievable. I mean, this is peak fiction. So much has led up to this point. It's so much has led up to these two fists connecting at the beginning of the next chapter. We're gonna have to find out what happens in 2 weeks. I have a couple more videos coming up about this chapter, one in particular on Blast and his full arsenal of capabilities that we know of so far. So make sure you're subscribed with the notification bell smashed, and I will see you on the next video.